Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Redcar. I also congratulate my honourable friend, the Member for Dorset West, for his tireless work on this issue and this bill in particular, and it's really clear from his contributions today how passionate he feels about animal welfare. I'd also like to place on record my admiration and thanks to the Finn's Law campaign. Now, I was proud to meet Finn and his handler when they visited Parliament at the start of this year. And since the royal assent of the Animal Welfare Service Animals Act 2019, the Finn's Law campaign has pushed hard for increased sentencing for the worst cases of cruelty and neglect, which this bill will of course bring into being. For too long, the most violent abusers of animals have been able to stain the UK's otherwise proud record on animal welfare. The current array of potential deterrents, including a fine, a ban on keeping animals and 6 months maximum in prison, has simply not been strong enough. And with calls to the RSPCA cruelty line increasing by almost 50,000 between 2018 and 2019 to a shocking 1.2 million. Now, in preparing for this debate, I learnt of some of the examples where punishments were not, in my opinion, in any way adequate, and we've heard of some of those today already. In one case, a cat was left in a washing machine for hours before it ultimately died. The perpetrator received just a disqualification from keeping animals for 5 years. I will indeed.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. We've spoken a lot already today about enforcement, and part of the problem with enforcement is when people are given banning orders for not being able to own a pet. So what would my honourable friend think about bringing forward greater enforcement powers to actually make sure that that is kept and that these people who are committing these most heinous of crimes no longer are allowed animals?
Absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I think that's something that we should discuss further as this bill progresses. So sadly, this particular individual was punished with a 4-month detention training order only and the requirement to pay £200 compensation to the cat's owner. I believe we should not and cannot allow the perpetrators of such acts to receive overly lenient punishment. And this bill, which will increase the maximum sentence for animal cruelty offences in England and Wales from 6 months to 5 years, is absolutely necessary to deter people from inflicting harm and death on defenceless animals. And my Vale of Clwyd constituents agree. Canine behaviourist Adam Hobbs has worked alongside rescue centres, including North Clwyd Animal Rescue, for over 15 years and often helps rehabilitate dogs which have been the victim of sustained neglect or acts of violence. He told me that one of the most difficult aspects of working with cruelty cases is trying to comprehend how the perpetrators face no real consequence or deterrent from repeating their atrocious behaviours again. Rehabilitating and caring for victims of animal abuse takes a huge emotional toll on those involved, and knowing the evil who caused such suffering face almost no barriers to causing such dreadful acts again is simply soul-destroying. This bill will form a vital pillar of our national approach to matters of animal welfare, which are respected the world over. At present, we stand woefully behind other countries, as we've heard, such as Australia, Canada and India, where the maximum punishment for animal cruelty is 5 years in prison. We must address this, and I believe, Mr Deputy Speaker, that in doing so, we can also help reduce the scourge of domestic abuse, which is often linked, another issue which has been brought up by honourable members. There are, however, 2 additional points that I believe should be considered. Even under the rules which we're discussing today, if an individual is convicted of the most serious violence towards animals, I would suggest they should not be trusted to keep animals again. The Dogs Trust is calling for an automatic ban on owning animals if a person is convicted of animal cruelty offences. I'm sympathetic to their justification that a change would not only be preventative in the way it stops the worst abusers keeping animals, but it would also add an extra layer of deterrent. Like all colleagues, I do not want to see the passage of this bill disrupted. We've waited long enough to see the change, but I'd be grateful if the suggestion of an automatic ban could be considered in greater detail at committee stage. The second point, which is more of a plea than a comment on the provisions of this bill, is that the powers of this bill are used to their full extent. In England and Wales last year, there were 1,218,364 reports of animal cruelty, but this translated into just 661 convictions in court. Unless there's monitoring and enforcement of this new legislation, the advantages brought by the bill will be negligible. By working with local authorities and relevant organisations, and by ensuring, as called for by Battersea, for clarity on sentencing guidelines, I hope the government will be able to ensure that the benefits of this bill are seen throughout England and Wales. Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill is a valuable tool in our fight against animal cruelty. It's clear that the provisions have support from across the House and the government, as they have done for many years, and I very much look forward to seeing it progress.